Hello, welcome to my presentation, Domestic Violence in Baltimore Latino Communities, for the class Race, Crime, and Social Policy. My name is Craig Haley, and I will be your presenter. If you have any questions or comments regarding this presentation, I will post my contact information at the end of the presentation. To get started, let's talk a little bit about Baltimore, Maryland. Baltimore, Maryland has a rich history when it comes to immigration. Since the early 20th century, immigrants from around the world have traveled thousands of miles to the United States to start a new life. Since then, Baltimore has become a melting pot of all races and ethnicities, blending together to form Baltimore's current diverse communities. Over the course of the 1990s, the population of immigrants began to decline, but at the turn of the century, the increase of immigrants have accelerated. Furthermore, the increase in immigrants is not primarily Europeans as it was in the early 20th century, but Central and South Americans, Asians, and Africans. Due to these new arrivals, the immigrant population has increased by approximately 25,000 people, which makes up 7.3% of the city's population. The city of Baltimore has suggested that the increase of immigrants has also increased the economy. The city of Baltimore has stated that foreign-born workers earned approximately $1 billion in wages in 2011. The city of Baltimore has also stated that the average median household income is approximately $40,000 in the year 2011. The city suggests that the immigrants have contributed to the community significantly, and they intend to attract new immigrants and retain the ones that they currently have residing inside the city. Aside from these initiatives, they have developed a task force to assist with the attraction and retention of these immigrants. But I will get into that shortly after a brief explanation of a few key points and elements to support my objectives. Over the next several minutes, I will identify and discuss several key objectives that pertain to my presentation. Today, we are going to focus on the main objective, which is the following. Over the last week, I have researched and prepared a short case study of problem-solving effort between a law enforcement agency and a specific location with a specific immigrant group. I will also be answering the following questions during the presentation that we will readdress at the end of the presentation as well. These questions are: what problems sparked the effort? What language and cultural barriers had to be overcome? What strategies were successful or unsuccessful? And did the relationship between the law enforcement and the immigrant people change as a result? If so, how? In addition to the main objective, we are also going to identify and discuss key points that wrap around the objectives of the case study, which are: identify cultural differences within the Latino communities, identify domestic violence issues within the Latino communities, discuss key points related to women in Latino communities, identify community involvement in regards to domestic violence and safety issues, and discuss key points related to communities and immigration of Latinos and other ethnicities or races. In Baltimore in the 1980s, the catalyst for the coordinated effort to reduce domestic violence began with Kurt Schmoke. In 1980, Mayor Schmoke was running for the state's attorney. For most of you that don't know what a state's attorney is, it is similar to the position of attorney general in most states. After speaking with a representative from the House of Ruth, a domestic violence advocacy group, Kurt Schmoke had made domestic violence a key part of his campaign platform. Once Mayor Schmoke was elected as Maryland's state attorney, he established a domestic violence unit within the state's attorney's office. After he was elected, Schmoke hired the House of Ruth's attorney, who he had previously discussed the domestic violence issues with, as the first head of the new unit. This task force was built from many different areas throughout the community and was constructed of representatives of various law enforcement agencies, the courts, the media, social service providers, health providers, and private citizens. The goal of this task force was to examine the domestic violence issues from within the community and make recommendations to improve the response, support services, and increase community awareness. After the Domestic Violence Coordinating Committee, or also known as the DVCC, had been in full effect for several years, they had hired a full staff to handle their unit, which included staff attorneys and legal staff to support them. While primarily being in charge of prosecuting domestic violence cases, the DVCC also attempted to speak with every victim prior to the trial date. the DVCC was also a large role in providing training to law enforcement agencies and as well as citizens. The DVCC has played an important role as in facilitating communication between various agencies and special units within their jurisdiction. By holding monthly meetings, they had kept all agencies up to date on the latest and greatest information and new funding that gave them more capabilities. Additional to the DVCC, law enforcement officers were required to write a report for all domestic violence calls after 1993. They were also required to give domestic violence victims a card describing their legal rights and identifying local service providers to assist with their needs. In addition, the House of Ruth, an advocacy group, has also played a large role in developing the DVCC and providing the committee with resources and training necessary to train, assist, and oversee operations in other agencies in their jurisdiction. This includes resources to assist domestic violence victims services that they may need in the event that they have become a victim. The House of Ruth at the time was the only domestic violence shelter and service provider in Baltimore area, and aside from assisting the development of the DVCC, has been an active and integral member of the DVCC for years. After the development of the DVCC, the law enforcement response has discovered that there are several populations that were underserved in their jurisdictions. One was identified as the Hispanic Latino community. At the time, the majority affected were women of this community. Once this was identified, law enforcement had discovered several barriers within the Hispanic population being underserved to include language barriers, cultural barriers, and transportation barriers. In addition, there were several incidents that were going unreported due to unknown reasons. After seeing some of these barriers, I decided to further research the Hispanic Latino culture and immigrant domestic violence so that we could better understand some of the key elements and variables that underlie these barriers. I also further researched unreported domestic violence in the Hispanic Latino communities to better understand elements behind that as well. After reviewing a recent case study in Baltimore, Maryland, labeling the city as the U.S. Gateway City, it suggests several aspects of why immigrants do not leave their abusers or report the psychological or physical abuse to seek help, as well as fear of being deported and isolation. Pierce and Sokoloff stated that NIMBY syndrome may also have an effect on reporting as well. NIMBY is identified as not in my backyard and reflects the community's resistance to the presence of immigrant services. While this does not support Hispanic and Latino specifically, the Handbook of Violence suggests that traditions, sociological factors, and many psychological factors related to abuse may have a large effect in Latino communities specifically. In addition, Pierce and Sokoloff also suggest that self-blame, resource availability, and prior abuse could be other additional underlying issues of unreported domestic violence incidents. In my own opinion, from personal experience, I think some immigrants of Hispanic or Latino descent, depending on where they are from, could have experienced negative contact with law enforcement in their home country before immigrating to the U.S. This can also be directly related to prior contact while in the U.S. as well. This being said, there can be a direct correlation between negative contacts that resulted in threats of being deported. With identifying some of these key elements, it can help connect and understand the barriers that the Hispanic and Latino community encounter when faced with domestic violence issues. This can also assist with identifying what types of issues and barriers law enforcement have while responding to domestic violence incidents, as well as while investigating shortcomings in a minority area or trying to understand why these issues go unreported. To better understand some of the cultures and traditions, I've decided to break down the sociological theory behind why men from Latin America treat women the way they do. According to the Handbook of Violence, men are shaped into what they will be as men from an early age in life. Each man is trained from boyhood to learn the role of a man, owner, father, and head of household that he will assume when he is an adult. They also learn that there are two people in this world. There are people who give orders and are served, and then there are people who serve and obey orders. This can be very simple to understand, but very complex with putting domestic violence behind it. There is also a theory that asserts that the majority of cultures accept that women are inferior to men, and that men create cultural forms that define and reinforce this inferiority. As we had discussed prior, there are plenty of supporting factors that Pierce and Sokolov have shown from a study in Baltimore of minority immigrants being psychologically, physically, and emotionally abused. There are also some underlying factors that can be related as well. They can be identified as deportation and isolation. But in the old country, or where they came from, we can look at traditions and economic status more closely. On average, women in Central America are typically married between the ages of 21 and 23. When we identify this, we can relate several other issues with their age and marriage, in which we will not discuss due to sticking with the specific objectives I have identified at the very beginning of the presentation. When comparing this to men from the same source, we can identify that the average age for men in Central America for marriage is between 24 and 27. This reveals that men are not much older than women when they marry in their home countries. We can relate a difference in life experience by just a small difference in age. At this age, many men have been out of the home and working for a long period of time, while Latino women have been at home with their parents or relatives until they are married. According to the Handbook of Violence, women may be molded or trained into being a wife or homemaker for their husband, since they are young and inexperienced with relationships. This can also be a key element with why women are socially accepting being a wife and provider in the home for their husbands and kids, and not working or going to school as their husbands may be doing. Since this is typically tradition, it is not irregular in this country for a woman to stay home, take care of the kids, do duties around the house, and serve their husbands. Since they do not work, they do not earn money for the family and do not have extra money to spend if they are in need to get away from their husbands. This can be identified as domesticity, or also known as family life. An additional element we can briefly touch is religion. Since the majority of Latin America is Roman Catholic, we can identify that for religious reasons, many women may not leave their husbands for domestic violence due to their oath of sacramental marriage. Without going into a lot of detail on this, we can assume that since many citizens in Latin America are devoted Catholics, they believe that divorce is not an option and that they should work out their issues and keep quiet about them. Now that I've identified some key traditional elements and variables that may underlie domestic violence, we can get back on track to answering the objective questions listed at the beginning of the presentation. Let's look at some of the statistics of domestic violence in Baltimore between 2006 and 2010 so we can better understand Baltimore's issues with domestic violence. In this slide, I have made up a small pie chart to show the population differences in the city of Baltimore, Maryland. In Baltimore, the population of African American community is 59% of the city's population. Whites make up less than 1/3 of the city's population at 30%, and Asians and other races add up to around 6% of the city's population. The African American community, regardless of being a minority in the state of Maryland as well as the United States, still make up almost double of whites, Asians, and other races combined. Since the Latino community falls into the white category, they make up approximately 4.6% of the white community in the city of Baltimore, making them a minority in themselves. While there are several foreign-born immigrants that call Baltimore home, a large portion of them come from Latin America countries such as Mexico, El Salvador, Jamaica, Trinidad, Tobago, and other South American countries as well. Now that we have identified a few statistics of population, let's look at some domestic violence statistics. The city of Baltimore, over a course of 4 years, strategized to decrease domestic violence crimes due to the increase in number in prior years. While there is no specific numbers based on Hispanics alone, we could do a little math and determine, based on the information given, a possible estimate of how many domestic violence incidents by Hispanic and Latinos. By taking 4.6% of the population of Baltimore City, we can do the same with the numbers shown for domestic violence. However, with the cultural differences that the Latino and Hispanic population bring to Baltimore, this can be inaccurate provided that their traditions and culture may lead to more domestic violence issues or unreported incidents, as I had discussed previously. Just to be creative, I did some math and determined 4.6% of the domestic violence statistics for each year in the previous slide. I based this on each year and taking 4.6% of the white category for domestic violence. I received the results listed on the graph from doing this. I know this is inaccurate and not factual, but since there was a lack of information in the reporting process due to Hispanic and Latino ethnicities falling under the white category, this is what the statistics would be for domestic violence incidents involving the Hispanic and Latino population if we base it on their actual percentage of the white population. In addition, I investigated further and took the other populations on the pie chart and attempted to find relevance in this theory as well. What I had found that Asian and other races' domestic violence statistics were 50% lower if I were to attempt to relate their population size with the domestic violence results for the total year. As I had said before, this is not factual, but I thought it would be creative to see what differences were between relating the population size and the total incidents from each year, and then comparing them to the actual numbers broken down by race that the state of Maryland had provided for each year. This can make my results inconclusive in the sense that they are not consistent. Between the 2000 and 2010 census, the overall population in Baltimore has decreased about 4.6%, or approximately 20,000. However, regardless of the decrease in general population, the Hispanic and Latino population has increased 134.7%, or by approximately 15,000 people between the 2000 and 2010 census. With this large increase in Hispanic and Latino population, there will always be an increase in need for Hispanic and Latino services. With Baltimore having a large number of immigrants coming in and a large number of the general population moving out, the statistics have proven that more of the Hispanic and Latino population is maintaining its residency in Baltimore and not moving out of the city. This can show that Baltimore takes care of its Hispanic and Latino population with their strategies and evolution of available services, whether it be new committees, culture diversity training for current employees, and possible language training for its current employees that do not speak the language. It has been proven by statistics that Baltimore has an increasing population of Hispanics and Latinos. The city of Baltimore has shown that the population of foreign-born citizens have much more lower unemployment rate compared to the general population. The city of Baltimore has also stated that more immigrants are starting small businesses and buying homes, which stimulates the economy. Since there are positive outcomes of immigrants moving into their city, Baltimore has vowed to start a new task force to help the immigrants of the city out with several areas. We will cover this shortly. With going back to the domestic violence issue, we can identify that since the 1980s, when Kurt Schmoke had campaigned and started his task force as the state's attorney, and through development and evolution of the DVCC and its committee members have identified and solved many issues that have been barriers and roadblocks in domestic violence within several communities, including the Hispanic and Latino community. With identifying these issues and determining a need, the Baltimore City Council developed the Baltimore City Hispanic Commission by City Council Ordinance in 2007. This commission was designed and created to serve as a liaison between Baltimore's Hispanic community and the Baltimore city government. The commission also researches and monitors issues and policies affecting Baltimore's Hispanic and Latino population. They recommend legislative and policy solutions to the mayor, the city council, and the city agencies such as law enforcement. The Hispanic Commission also promotes awareness of Hispanic and Latino culture to Baltimore citizens, officials, and business leaders. Currently, the Hispanic Commission offers support and services to victims of domestic violence. The services they currently have available are legal services, health services, government services, family services, career planning services, and education services. Since they are aware of these issues women fight on a day-to-day basis, they have the resources available to assist someone in planning and removing themselves from domestic violence situations. This can support that the DVCC and the Hispanic Commission have been successful in identifying issues, providing solutions, getting feedback, and continuing to evolve those solutions into current Hispanic and Latino community that they have today. As I briefly touched on previously, the City of Baltimore has made several promises to the immigration community. The City of Baltimore's Mayor, Stephanie Rawlings Blake, has developed a task force called the New Americans Task Force. This task force was created to assist her administration's efforts to attract new immigrants to her city, as well as retain the immigrants that are currently living in the city that she serves. The task force also assists the mayor with defining high-priority areas for the city to focus on, so that the minorities moving into the area are retained in the city, and that the mayor and the city can assist them with being successful American citizens in whatever their endeavors are. The New Americans Task Force focuses on recommendations on several essential areas that assist immigrants that move into the city of Baltimore. They can be categorized by economic growth and community well-being. There are many recommendations from the task force in which we could discuss, but the main area I would like to touch on is the community well-being. Community well-being has 3 areas that were recommended for improvement for development. 2 in particular that I would like to touch on are safety and youth recommendations. The safety recommendation is based on 4 different areas that were identified by the New Americans Task Force as necessary areas to work on and further develop as a strategy to attract and retain immigrants, including the Hispanic population, whose population has rapidly increased in the last 10 to 15 years. These recommendations include emphasizing the Baltimore Police Department's role in protecting all Baltimoreans, increase interagency collaboration, develop and monitor mechanisms to track crime and reporting incidents involving new Americans, and create new American community liaison positions. With transitioning into the youth recommendation, the New Americans Task Force has aimed to identify, promote, and expand education and extracurricular opportunities that facilitate high school completion and develop community-minded citizens in the city. Recommendations include enrichment activities, community engagement in youth education, and access to work opportunities. The task force has also identified that a positive environment for youth can best be provided when parents and the community are engaged. This can be related to providing a future for these children and assisting with education that domestic violence is not the answer. With relating these recommendations to current and past events, we can identify an effort even before the New Americans Task Force was developed of the city of Baltimore, attempting to better serve the Hispanic and Latino population in regards to language barriers, cultural misunderstandings, and understanding unreported crimes, including domestic violence. Looking at a timeline that the city of Baltimore had created, it looks as if they had 33 Spanish-speaking officers in January of 1997, only 3 of which were women. After several years of language and cultural barriers in 2007, Officer Rosa Ramirez from the Baltimore Police Department became the Hispanic liaison for the Southeastern District where most of the Hispanic and Latino population resided. Since then, the state of Arizona implemented a controversial immigration law which requires local police officers to ask residents for immigration papers. News of the law sparked fear in Hispanic residents in Baltimore, and many of them turned to Stephanie Rawlings Blake, who was the newly elected mayor, to represent them in their issues. The Baltimore City Hispanic Commission presented these issues to the mayor and the local law enforcement due to the Hispanic and Latino population's fear. In 2012, Mayor Rawlings Blake signed an executive order into law that makes it illegal for Baltimore police officers to inquire about a resident's immigration status. Since the mayor of Baltimore was elected, her push to assist immigrants with establishing their lives in the community has been diligent, and the fact that she has developed many programs to assist with the Hispanic and Latino community. One in particular is the multicultural program that the Baltimore County Police Department has created to assist Hispanic and Latino minorities as well as other minorities in the community with developing a relationship. This program has a liaison that is designed to assist the police department with specific goals that are in conjunction with the multicultural issues that the city has. Some of these can be identified as identifying various cultural groups throughout the city, building relationships with multicultural community, responding to critical incidents to assist with multicultural trust, assist special units in accompanying their tasks at hand that are related to multicultural groups, assistance training officers with instruction aimed at eliminating cultural barriers, providing training to many different cultural groups throughout the county of Baltimore, and coordinate between witnesses in the courts. They also construct and maintain positive relationships between community members and the police department, eliminate fear of the police and deportation so that the new Americans of specific cultural groups will report crime, reduce crime and victimization, motivate and recruit members from the multicultural population as volunteers to assist with the department efforts, and seek qualified individuals from the diverse multicultural population to become police officers with the police department. Officer Rosa Ramirez has since become a senior liaison officer of the City of Baltimore Police Department and has met with community leaders and citizens many times to coordinate outreach programs for the citizens so that law enforcement and the citizens of Baltimore can educate each other on issues they have. Officer Ramirez has been educating the public for several years now on misconceptions behind law enforcement. She has admitted in a 2012 session with community leaders and local citizens in support of Latino outreach that despite the efforts to find suitable candidates for the department, there are occasional officers that slip through the cracks and get past all of the psychological and truthful testing that they apply to new recruits to ensure that there is not deception or corruption present when hiring them. She stated that there are occasional bad apples in the group and that it happens. Officer Ramirez stated that they have to educate each other on what is going on and identify key issues that relate to both the public and law enforcement so they can maintain that trust and ability to communicate openly and understand the minority's culture. With changes in the system, it requires identifying a problem, identifying and applying solutions to that problem, revisiting the solutions to ensure that they are working efficiently and change as needed, and revisiting the issues as they evolve over time. With domestic violence in Baltimore inside the Hispanic and Latino community, I feel that over time, the law enforcement effort has been diligent in identifying issues, developing solutions, and evolving with those issues and solutions over time to assist with educating and training community members and other law enforcement officers. In this presentation, I've identified and discussed several key objectives that pertain to problem-solving effort between law enforcement agencies and cooperating agencies in a specific location and a particular immigrant group. We have specifically identified that Baltimore Police Department and Baltimore County Police Department have identified problems within the Hispanic and Latino community in Baltimore City regarding domestic violence and issues related to unreported crime and successfully provided adequate solutions to the community through over 30 years of evolving solutions. Through cultural and language barriers, increase in population, and many other obstacles, the City of Baltimore and its leaders have adopted to challenges and succeeded through diligence and hard work to serve the Hispanic and Latino community. In addition, I wanted to address the answer to each question to reflect on the community. What problem sparked the effort? After Domestic Violence Coordinating Committee, or the DVCC, was created and law enforcement were involved, the DVCC asked law enforcement for their feedback on several different issues regarding their work. Baltimore Police Department responded, informing the DVCC that there were shortcomings in the Hispanic Latino community as well as other minority communities. What language and cultural barriers had to be overcome? With identifying cultural and language barriers over time, the Baltimore Police Department and the City of Baltimore have developed programs with liaisons that are specifically serving multicultural groups. By assigning someone as a liaison, they can communicate with the community leaders and citizens to educate them on police department policies, day-to-day activities, and the law so they can effectively understand the Baltimore Police Department's reasoning behind certain actions. The liaison can also identify and learn about cultural issues that may be hindering operations of the police department and work with the community leaders and citizens to come to an understanding and develop strategies to fix problems. Since then, the city has also developed a Hispanic committee inside the City of Baltimore to assist with educating the City Council and other agencies about other cultural issues, and to assist with developing policies in the city to assist with multicultural issues. What strategies were successful or unsuccessful? By developing these strategies of having liaisons and a new community, the City of Baltimore has been extremely successful with partnering with the community in developing better relationships to educate each other on unfamiliar cultural issues or new evolving issues within the city. How did the relationship between law enforcement and the immigrant people change as a result? These relations between law enforcement and the Hispanic and Latino community has improved over time with developing strategies and making resources available. However, there are still some trust issues within the community about how some of the officers in the department that the community has had to deal with over time. In regards to domestic violence, there has been no evidence of an increase of reporting due to lack of statistics. But over the course of 2006 to 2013, the domestic violence statistics have fallen in every category of race. This can be possibly contributed to the city's effort of community policing and assigning specific individuals to work with multicultural groups to resolve the issues within their communities and between the department. In addition to the main objective, I also identified many key objectives that have elements to the underlying issues behind the city's Hispanic and Latino domestic violence and unreported crimes issue. In today's presentation, I identified and discussed key points that wrap around the objectives of the case study, which are identifying cultural differences within the Latino communities, identifying domestic violence issues within the Latino communities, discussing key points related to women in the Latino communities, identifying community involvement in regards to domestic violence and safety issues, and discussing key points related to communities and immigration of Latinos and other ethnicities or races. If you have any questions about this presentation, please email at the email listed below. Thank you for taking the time to view my presentation.